When you think of sugar, you probably think of sweetness, right? But what if there's a hidden cost? A cost that's not about money, but about the very soil our food grows in. Today, we're digging into the surprising story of sugarcane, rain, and the delicate balance that keeps our farmland healthy.
It's a total paradox, isn't it? The same rain that our crops need to live can actually become this destructive force. And that's the central puzzle that farmers and scientists are trying to solve. Okay, let's get into it.
So for any farm, rain is everything. But on sloped fields, it can be a total thief. It carries away that precious topsoil and all the good nutrients along with it. This process is called erosion. And look, this is a huge deal. It's a real threat to soil health and even our food security.
So how do we get to the bottom of this? Well, we're going to dive into a major scientific study. This whole explainer is based on a 2025 paper from researcher Yanhui Huang and their team. It was published in the journal Agronomy, and it took a really deep look into sugarcane farming in southern China.
And this wasn't just some quick lab experiment, We're talking 4 years. 4 years, these researchers were on the ground, meticulously tracking 97 separate storms. They really wanted to see what happens in the real world every single time it rains on a sugarcane field.
So, the first big clue they found was this. Not all rain is the same. It's not created equal. The team had to figure out which type of rainfall was the real villain here, the one causing the most damage.
What they did was break the rain down into 4 basic patterns. Everything from long, slow drizzles to these short, intense bursts. But the one you really gotta watch is pattern A. See that? It has the highest intensity. That means the sheer force of the water hitting the ground was the greatest.
Okay, let's just break this down. Think of it like gentle showers versus these destructive downpours. Those destructive ones, those pattern A storms, they're all about that high intensity. They don't just water the plants, they absolutely hammer the ground like millions of tiny fists.
And get this, the result is just wow. A whopping 61% of all the soil that was lost, all that sediment washed away, came from those intense pattern A storms. Now, these storms weren't even the most common ones, but their intensity made them the most destructive by far. So the main takeaway here, it's not how much it rains that matters most, it's how hard it rains.
Okay, so the type of rain was a huge piece of the puzzle, but it was only half the story. The scientists found another absolutely critical factor that decided just how much damage a storm would do: the age of the sugarcane plant itself.
To really get this, you have to look at the sugarcane's life cycle. When it's just a tiny seedling, it barely covers the ground. We're talking just a measly 11% of cover. But as it grows, its leaves spread out and create this natural canopy, eventually covering almost 80% of the soil. That canopy is basically the plant's own little shield.
And this leads to one of the most important findings of the whole study. More than half, 50.2% to be exact, of all the soil erosion over 4 years happened during that short, early seedling stage. The ground was almost completely bare, so there was no plant shield to protect it from the force of that intense rain.
I mean, think about it like this. A young sugarcane field with almost no cover is like a bare roof in a hailstorm, totally exposed. But a mature field with a thick canopy of leaves, that acts like a dense forest of umbrellas, catching the raindrops and protecting that fragile soil underneath.
All right, so we've got 2 culprits: intense rain and these super vulnerable young plants. But the scientists found one more twist in the story, a really costly problem that has to do with fertilizer.
Okay, real quick, let's talk about how nutrients get lost. Some of them, called particulate nutrients, are literally stuck to the soil particles that wash away. But others, the dissolved nutrients like nitrate, they're like sugar and water. They just wash away with the runoff itself.
And here is the dilemma. To get the plants growing strong, farmers add fertilizer during that middle phase of growth, the tillering stage. But the study found that this is exactly when the runoff of those dissolved nutrients is at its absolute peak. So the very stuff meant to feed the crop is just getting washed right down the hill. And the numbers here are just wild. Almost half. I'm talking nearly 50% of all that lost nitrogen disappeared during this one stage, right after the farmers had spent their time and money putting it on the fields. This isn't just an environmental problem, it's a huge economic waste.
So, after all this, what's the big takeaway? Well, the bright thing about research like this is that it doesn't just point out problems, it actually gives us solutions. The study laid out 2 really clear actions that farmers can take.
The researchers came up with 2 really clear, powerful recommendations. First, protect the seedlings. It's all about finding ways to increase ground cover during that incredibly vulnerable early stage, maybe using mulch or other crops. And second,
Time the fertilizer. Put it down earlier in the plant's life, well before the heavy rainy season starts, so the crop has time to actually absorb it, instead of watching it wash away.
And don't just take my word for it. Here it is straight from the researchers themselves. They recommend tailoring practices to specific growth stages. It's not just about farming, it's about farming smarter. It's about working with the plant's life cycle and the weather patterns, not against them.
You know, when you really think about it, this story is about so much more than just sugarcane. It's a lesson in observation and timing. By understanding that complex dance between the rain, the soil, and the plant, we can find simple but powerful ways to protect our most valuable resource. It makes you wonder, right? What other hidden cycles are out there, just waiting for us to take a closer look?